They never called it after, and no one ever said what happened or when it ended. It's just before and now. Now meant walls, now meant rationing, and now meant cabbage. The fields stretched further than anyone liked to admit. Green, endless, almost peaceful rows of thick-headed cabbage swollen from months of rain. Too much rain, some said. But no one complained out loud. The rain meant quiet. Rain meant the things stayed away. No one knew why. Not really. People pretended they did. That was different. Harvest season wasn't announced. It was felt. The guards stopped joking. The elders started whispering. And the fighters, the real ones, began sharpening things that weren't meant to be sharpened. Kitchen knives, construction blades, pieces of metal filed down into desperate shapes. Nobody asked who first decided cabbage was worth dying for. Nobody asked because everyone already knew the answer. It wasn't the cabbage. It was the winter after. They picked 12. They always picked 12. Nobody remembered when the number started. Only that fewer never came back with enough. And more attracted attention. The choosing happened in the Senate yard beneath the floodlights. There was no speeches, no ceremony, just names. 8 regulars, men and women who had gone out before and returned thinner each time, harder each time, quieter each time. People stopped asking them questions years ago. One man came back missing 2 fingers and refused to explain where they'd gone. Another returned with mud packed into both ears so deeply they bled when they cleaned them. A woman named Ellis came back 1 year and burned every piece of clothing she wore outside the walls. The next harvest she volunteered again anyway. And then came the wanderers. There was 4 this year. Drifters. Trade scavengers. People desperate enough to exchange labor for shelter. The first 3 were easy choices. Old scars, bad teeth, one had the look. People who already belonged to the world outside. The 4th, he didn't fit. Clean jacket, clear eyes, too calm. Like he hadn't learned the correct shape of fear yet. I've been further than the outer canals, he said when they questioned him. Nobody answered. And then he added, there are places out there the rain never reaches. That silenced the yard. Even the veterans looked at him after that. Not shocked. Concerned. You've been beyond the 3rd wall? One of the guards asked quietly. The clean man looked at him for a moment and then smiled. He stopped measuring distance after the 3rd wall. Nobody spoke again after that. But his name still went on the list. They needed 12. That night the compound didn't sleep. Not out of fear. Out of calculation. People counted food. They counted fuel. They counted who might not come back. Inside the cramped apartments and converted storage rooms, families spoke in whispers. whispers thin enough to pass through concrete. A little girl cried when her father's boots were placed beside the door. Her mother told her to stop. Not in a cruel way, just automatically, like she was afraid the walls themselves were listening. The veterans prepared differently than the others. No drinking, no prayers, just routines. Checking straps, checking ammunition, checking each other. One of them, Mercer, he sat sharpening a rusted machete long after the blade stopped improving. The clean wanderer sat beside him eventually. You sharpen like you think it matters, the clean man said. Mercer never looked up. You talk like you know it doesn't. For the first time, the wanderer's smile disappeared. They left at first light. Engines low. No music. No unnecessary talking once the gates were open. The massive steel doors groaned apart just enough for the convoy to pass, and then sealed immediately behind them. The sound echoed further than it should have. Out beyond the walls, the world wasn't dead. It just wasn't theirs anymore. Roads dissolved in the mud within miles. Telephone poles leaned at impossible angles. Entire neighborhoods sat flooded to their rooftops. The rain had changed everything. Or maybe uncovered something that had always been waiting underneath. Nobody knew. Nobody alive anyway. The fields appeared slowly through the fog, endless green. Perfect rows stretching over rolling hills and disappearing into a great distance. Too healthy. Too orderly. One of the younger wanderers muttered, "How the hell does any of this still grow?" Nobody answered him. The veterans never answered questions like that. They worked fast. Cut, stack, load. Cut, stack, load. The rhythm mattered. Stopping meant thinking. Thinking meant noticing things. At first, the field seemed normal. Then little details started pressing at the edges. A cabbage head turned slightly after being harvested. Not rolling, turning. One of the trailers passed a section already neatly cut and stacked. No tire tracks nearby. No footprints. Just piles waiting quietly in the rain. Someone found an old scarecrow standing deep in the rows. Except it wasn't made from straw. It wore rain-soaked clothing. Real clothing. Fresh clothing. Mercer tore it down without saying a word. Nobody asked what was underneath the hood. By evening, tension finally loosened enough for conversation. A fire burned low between the trucks, dim enough to not travel. The clean wanderer sat near the edge of the camp, watching the fields instead of the flames. "You really seen one?" someone finally asked him. The wanderer nodded. "Up close?" "And?" He took a long time answering. "It watched me. It didn't attack." The wanderer stared out into the dark rows. "Not right away." Silence settled over the camp. Rain tapped softly against metal. When the wanderer spoke again, they don't always attack. Nobody moved. Sometimes they just watch. Mercer looked up sharply. The wanderer continued. Sometimes they just count. That ended the conversation. Morning came. Still nothing. No movement. No sounds except rain and machinery. By midday, people started believing it. Maybe this was the year. Maybe the rain finally driven them off for good. Maybe survival had just gotten a little bit easier. That was the dangerous thought. The one that always came first. The missing wanderer vanished sometime afternoon. No scream. No struggle. 1 second there, and then the next, he was gone. They found tracks leading away from camp. Boot prints only. Nothing followed them. Nothing chasing. Just footprints disappearing into wet green rows. The store sat half collapsed at the edge of the old highway. Shelves stripped bare years ago, except for what he found. Cans, sugar, bottles, chocolate, normal things. Things people used to want before survival became the only currency left. They didn't yell when they brought him back. They didn't thank him either. The veterans just exchanged looks. They ordered the convoy to pack immediately. Early departure. Nobody argued. The trucks rolled heavy now, full to the brim. For the first time in years, full. That should have felt good. Instead, it felt loud, like they had stolen something. The attack came without warning. The third vehicle lifted off the ground, not flipped, it lifted. Mud streamed downward from the tires as the entire truck hung suspended for one impossible second. Nobody even had time to react. And then it folded inward. Metal screamed. Glass exploded outward. The entire frame compressed like an invisible jaw had closed around it. And the people inside, they were gone before anyone could scream. The silence hit first. Then sounds, not a roar, not mechanical, something layered, like several noises trying to become one voice, like radio static learning how to breathe. Movement rippled through the fields. Wrong movement. Too fast in one direction, too slow in another. Shapes unfolding incorrectly between rows of cabbage. Limbs, or things pretending to be limbs, that bent halfway and then bent again somewhere else entirely. One shape moved behind the truck despite it being larger than the truck itself. Mercer fired first. The shot connected. Something reacted in the dark. Not pain. Recognition. Then they were inside the convoy. Up close. They didn't make sense. Surfaces shifted when viewed directly. Parts of them looked grown. Other parts of them looked assembled. Openings appeared across their body that weren't mouths, but led somewhere deeper than the body should allow. And inside, movement. More movement. Like things were still building themselves under the skin. People disappeared mid-motion, not dragged, not torn apart, just gone, like space itself had rejected them. One fighter reached for a truck door and vanished elbow first before the rest of them followed. Another fired wildly into the rain until the sound cut off halfway through a scream. The clean wanderer ran through the chaos, not away from it, but through it, like he knew where the gaps would be open before they did. Back to the gates, somebody screamed over the radios. The convoy turned hard toward home, engines screaming, shapes moving alongside them in the rain, keeping pace, watching. They didn't win. They escaped barely. A few trucks, a few bodies, a few minds still intact enough to remember the road home. The gates opened just long enough, then slammed shut behind them. Locked, sealed. The compound felt silent except for breathing, counting, trying to understand who made it back and who didn't. They followed us, someone asked. No, Mercer answered immediately, too quickly, too certain. The night settled over the walls. No rain now. For the first time in weeks, the sky stood completely still. At first, the sound outside resembled wind. Then the walls began to tremble. Not from impact, from pressure, from presence. The tower guards climbed the floodlights and looked out across the dark fields, then stopped moving entirely. People below started shouting for answers, but nobody answered. One of the guards whispered, "Oh God." They climbed the towers too, and then they saw them. Not dozens, not hundreds, thousands, covering the fields in layered movement, stacked over each other in shapes that never fully settled long enough for the eye to understand. Watching the walls, watching the gates, waiting, silent now, completely silent. And then the mass began moving forward as one. And somewhere, far out beyond the fields, something enormous moved beneath the dark. Sleep tight, or don't. From dusk till dawn. Thank you for listening.